Sorry, I'm, as usual, trying to rig my stuff up here. It's not working very well all of a sudden. Okay, that's better. How's it going, everybody? I hope you're all well. I'm certainly not. I'm sick as hell still, and I have the music performance scheduled for tomorrow. Probably gonna reschedule that again because I can't be full of mucus and perform. But there are a few things that I felt inspired or compelled to. Oh my gosh. Anyways, so one of the really powerful opportunities of our present moment. I have no idea why this is always the wrong dimensions. This camera. Anyways, we live in one of the most divisive times. Certainly the most divisive time in my lifetime, and I think probably the last generation. I mean, it's polarized really badly, and I'm of course of the opinion that that is a manufactured circumstance. But I saw something really interesting today, which was Russel Brand having a conversation with Ben Shapiro. And in case you don't know who either one of those guys are, Russel Brand was a comedian and actor who is now sort of like a spiritual, I don't want to say guru, but he's like I think he would probably say he's a cultural commentator. And Ben Shapiro is a right-wing, very religious, yarmulke-wearing, right-wing cultural commentator. And the first big surprise that I had was when I saw Joe Rogan and Ben Shapiro sit down for a conversation. And that's actually very inspiring to me, because if you're my age or older and you identified with the left for most of your life, as I did, trying to imagine a right-winger, especially like a leading media right-winger, having a conversation with somebody like Joe Rogan, who's talking about DMT and, very, very open, very left-wing. And the conversation was not only civil, but, here we have this person who, we all know the media shapes the way that people think. And so this very well-respected and influential right-wing, what do they call those guys? I can't remember anyways, let's call him a commentator. He was receptive to the idea that something like DMT could actually be beneficial. And when I was a kid, there was no right-wing anything. If you were willing to entertain the possibility that something like DMT could be beneficial, you weren't right-wing. So that was the first inclination I had that something was moving in the right direction, regardless of appearances, which suggests very strongly that we're moving away from each other, politically and culturally. And I've noticed this for a long time. And actually, when I was maybe 20 years ago in the early 2000s, I thought that we would abridge a lot of the most important gaps by now. And I was actually really surprised to see, during the Trump election and all of the stuff that's transpired over the last few years, the amount of division that we've been experiencing. Because people that were Republicans and right-wingers didn't seem so absolutely opposed to the things that the left disagreed with them about. I don't know if I could say vice versa, but I think that, at least at that time, the left was probably correct about everything that, at least that I was aware of, that they were pushing, which was basically just, personal freedom issues, legalization of drugs, abortion, that sort of stuff. Well, I mean, I actually was really impressed with Ben Shapiro today. And he was really impressed with Russell Brand, I think. Because, I doubt that he had ever heard anyone from the left speak like that. And I think that Russell really put a lot of thought into it before, I mean, if you're going to go into the lion's den, you need to have a strategy or you're not coming out, certainly not intact. But I don't think that people that are so disparate generally have these conversations at all, much less in front of millions of people on YouTube. And I don't know if maybe they have these things on other platforms, this conversation with these two. So, the basic gist of it is that the right and left, regardless of the appearance of division, actually have more common ground that they're standing on than they ever have before. There's so much. There's so much. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I understand exactly what all that was. And sure, I mean, I'm sure Shapiro is a hypocrite, but I'm not saying Shapiro is amazing or that he's perfect or any of this shit. I'm saying that Shapiro versus the conservatives from 20 years ago, he is a godsend by contrast, you know. And I think that if he's able to facilitate some understanding, because basically here's what's happening. The left and right are both being fed the most extreme behaviors and ideologies from the fringes of each side, as if that is the majority, and it's not. And the reality is that there's so much more overlap than there has ever been before, and it's. No, I don't want to follow anybody. I don't care about any of these people. You don't understand. I don't care about Ben Shapiro. I don't watch anyone's stuff. No one. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that it is really good and really important that the audiences that those two people have. I don't watch Russell Brand either. I don't watch anyone's anything anywhere. I don't. I have no reason to. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing. I literally don't watch anything that I don't care what anyone has to say. It doesn't matter if they're political or not. I'm not interested. I just don't do that. I'm not in search of other people's ideas. But what I am interested in is unity, because the sense of division that we have is something that is being very carefully cultivated, and it's very much illusory. People actually are on the same page and they're working for the same goals, and they have propaganda machines feeding them a false narrative that that the opposite is happening. And I'll give you an example. Well, I'm not saying that what they're saying doesn't have value. I'm just saying that I'm not gonna consume their content. It's just I'm sure they are, and I support it, but I just don't. I don't have any need. But thank you for the suggestion. I mean, I don't do that. I haven't read anything or heard anyone say. Actually, the only person that said anything in the last 20 years that I felt added anything to my being was Russell Brand today, and he just said something that I hadn't considered from that perspective. But I'm not in search of or feeling in need of information, you know. The only thing I'll do is kind of scan around to see kind of what people are thinking, like people that represent different demographics. I'll kind of look at the titles of their videos and stuff and kind of see what they might be thinking. Oh, by the way, Charles, since you're here, I didn't respond to a comment you made last week that I thought was just completely off the wall and just not reflective of reality. You said there's no evidence that Trump's kids have been abused. And I would say that Trump has abused his daughter on national television many, 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 many times over several decades. And there's video of it. I mean, I think, I don't know if you're looking for a hero or if you're in denial or something, but he's touched her inappropriately to the degree that she's had to take his hands and remove them from her ass. He has, he said to a Washington Post reporter, "Is it bad that I'm more attracted to my 13-year-old daughter than I am to my wife?" He's made comments about her that would be construed as abusive by pretty much any psychologist on earth on television. I mean, I don't see why you would say that. I mean, he has been disgusting in public for decades. And if you mean that, like, you don't think he's actually raped her or something, maybe not, probably not, I would imagine. But he's definitely abusive, and he's definitely been abusive and disgusting on television for, is he as bad as Joe Biden in that regard? I don't think so. Somebody, by the way, you guys, do hit the like button, share, subscribe, and support me on Patreon. I lost a supporter again, a very long time supporter, because I was, talking about Biden again. This guy, he did this before, during the election. I said something about Biden, so he withdrew his support. So we do appreciate if you like this content. There's a PayPal email address, cryptocurrency wallet address, Binance Smart Chain, and Cash App. But yeah, I mean, I think they're all gross pedophiles, both of them. I think that Trump and Biden should both be put on a spaceship and sent to Mars. I mean, I don't think making excuses for either one of them or trying to ally yourself with either one of them. I do think maybe it's unfortunate that Biden was elected, because I think that his presence on television, his rambling, his saying disgusting things to 7-year-olds on national television, while looking at them like he wants to eat them, is further dividing the country. There's nothing good about it. I saw Kamala Harris on television today promoting green energy as a way to blow people up. One of the things I wanted to talk about in this live stream is, well, no, that's not what I'm saying. He's, okay, far better than other politicians. All I'm saying is that the stuff that he has said about, dude, you're saying there's no way he's a pedo. He said to a Washington Post reporter, "Is it wrong that I'm more attracted to my 13-year-old daughter than to my wife?" How is he not a pedophile? He's not only a pedophile, he is so, what do you call it, like out of touch with our normal reality. He doesn't even realize that, like, he was literally asking the reporter if there was anything wrong with the fact that he was more attracted to his daughter, who was then 13, than his wife. So I disagree. I don't understand why you're saying that. It's documented publicly. There's video of it. He said things in interviews. He's disgusting. I mean, he's just wretched. But would it be better just to have kept him? Yeah, that was a weird thing to say. That's putting it mildly. I mean, I'm not trying to be contentious, but come on, man. So one of the things that I'm saying with this, I mean, basically, I'm getting like way off track here, and I don't like it very much, because I watched the last live stream and I was like, man, you got to really just get to the point and just keep these things together, because I was just wandering all over the place like this, and I did have important stuff I wanted to try to communicate tonight. And I'm not trying to glorify Russell Brand or Ben Shapiro. All I'm saying is that conversations such as the one that transpired between them are very, very important and very, very powerful, in the sense that they can serve to unify a very divided population, and a population that is being divided intentionally. And the mechanisms that are being used to do that, and the reason that I want to talk about cognitive biases and the different types of cognitive biases, is because, it's microcosm, macrocosm. The internal work that we do on ourselves is going to be inevitably reflected in the external world. There's just no way around it. That's just how it works. I mean, you can invoke woo and take it there with that, but you can also just understand it in pragmatic, practical terms of just, cause and effect. And so one of the things that fractures our being, and that I mean, I think that these biases are the fundamental mechanism through which people are manipulated. They are the machinations and that which facilitates propaganda. And if we become aware of them, we learn to recognize them, and we know how to define them, it allows you to spot the propaganda and to neutralize it. And also, it's really important to know when you're wrong, to be open to the possibility that you're wrong, and embrace not knowing, which I've noticed is a tremendously difficult thing for the overwhelming majority of people. And you know, for me, I've just never understood why that is. It's not a problem. It's good. It gives you room to grow and to, you know, embrace new ideas. You can't put more water in a cup that is already full. It's just not going to happen. And so this holistic perception is what makes us whole people that are able to perceive our environment, the world that we live in, as it actually is, instead of you know, our projections. And I really think that is the fundamental aberration that makes it so difficult for people to, you know, see what's going on and to figure out how to relate to it. And the reason that these biases have such a strong hold over people, this is something I've really struggled to understand over the last year or so, or I guess it's been 2 years now, you know, the 2020 election, whenever that was. I just didn't understand why people get so crazy when you trigger these biases. You know, like, what are they clinging to? And the reality is that it is because they are inextricably intertwined with our instinct. Our survival instinct is predicated on these biases, or is totally dependent upon biases. You know, if you don't have a bias against walking on unstable ground. Greetings, Randy. Watching Bush. That's a great name. I don't know if that's supposed to be a dirty joke or not. It's so that's what I'm getting at, and that's one of the reasons that they are such powerful tools for manipulating people. Is that people, once they have the biases, they are rooted in them so deeply because they are part of our survival instinct. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what the different types of biases are. And it explains so much about, you know, when you look out into the world and you're like, what the fuck is going on with these people? This is what's going on. Anchoring bias is the first one that we'll talk about. And so anchoring bias is, it describes the fact that whatever information people get at first is more, they place more value on that than information that comes later. So for example, now, you know, COVID, originally, you know, everyone was laughing at you and calling you an idiot. I mean, I don't know how many people blocked me on Facebook for saying that I didn't believe that COVID didn't come from that laboratory in Wuhan that literally has, it's like the only laboratory in the world that specifically engineers a strain of the virus that can be contracted by humans. You know, it's like, of course it didn't come from there, even though it was traced right to the doorstep. Like, and it just blew my mind that, you know, that people, but that's, let's skip that for a second. That's a whole different subject. All we're talking about here is that the fact that they receive that information first. And it also helps that one of the tools of propaganda is that people take imprints much more thoroughly if they're very, very afraid when they receive them. And so they build up a tremendous pitch of fear, and then they feed you with information. And so, that was another indication that there's some propaganda going on here. And so now that, Fauci's emails have been released and he's not even showing up to hearings, I just saw somewhere that there was a hearing on COVID or something, he just didn't show up because he knows he's probably about to be scapegoated for the whole thing, as if it was just. I've heard the Democrats are like turning their backs on him, like, oh, we don't know this guy or whatever, as if they didn't know the whole time. It's pretty crazy, you guys. I mean, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but the conspiracy theorists really are just like really getting a lot of points lately. Even to the extent that some of the media guys, speaking of what's his name, Brand and Shapiro, another one would be Jon Stewart, right? He's like a king of liberal media. He was on the Daily Show or something the other day, and he was talking like, the left always, obviously it came from a lab. I mean, I knew that from the beginning, didn't we all? You'd have to be stupid to think otherwise. And that was a bit weird because I'm going, wait a minute, I know for a fact that you were one of the voices out there supporting the narrative that it was definitely not from a lab. We should trust the scientists, do everything they tell us. So that is pretty weird when these guys just completely flip their script and try to act like they were saying something different the whole time. But anyways, anchoring bias. The information you get at first, and it helps if you're in an emotionally heightened state. When you receive the information, you will cling to it. And that is why now that we have Fauci's emails saying that, of course, masks don't work. I mean, if I had one around, I would put it on and take a big drag of, some tobacco or something. And you blow it out. And if you blow it out without a mask, it goes this way. If you put a mask on and blow it out, it goes to the sides. The same distance. I mean, you can see what happens. It just changes the direction. That's all it does. So even though, this information has come out that it almost definitely came from that laboratory, that in Fauci's emails it says that he knew the whole time it came from the laboratory and just straight up lied, that they always knew that masks didn't work. Most people, the overwhelming majority of people, are going to stick with the original narrative that they were imprinted with while they were very, very afraid, and it was also, they were anchored to it. I mean, I wear a mask sometimes just because I'm in a foreign country, and I don't want to be that gringo walking around on the continent that is supposed to have 8 times the normal death rate, from the country that has the most COVID, walking around with no fucking mask on. I mean, it just seems like a douchey thing to do. And I also feel like, it's not really that harmful to just wear it. But at this point, I definitely support rebellion to any extent. You know what I mean? Like, I totally support you. I would not submit to anyone about anything at this point. I think we really need to honor our sovereignty as divine beings and use our intuition and intelligence to make our decisions. And obviously, the mainstream narrative is ridiculous. Most of the conspiracy narratives are too. So I feel like our job is to sift through the whole morass, separate the wheat from the chaff. And, it's not easy because there's just so much information and almost all of it is wrong. So that's anchoring bias, and you really have to watch out for that one. And it explains a lot of the COVID stuff and why people don't change their minds. So let's see. Availability heuristic bias. This one can work out to your benefit. But availability heuristic bias is basically believing that the information that we have is more important than it actually is. And there are a number of ways that can manifest, but I would just cite Q as probably the best example in recent history. Of heuristic availability bias. Unfortunately, I took my notes in some god-awful red pen that I just can't even read. Okay, so another manifestation of that is that people actually don't get their information from facts and statistics, but they get their information from media and the general public opinion, which is another form of bias. that we'll talk about in a minute. But that's that also explains a lot about the whole COVID thing, and also, the drug legalization movement has had to battle against heuristic bias since the beginning. It's probably the best example of that. People believing that the information that they have, also, it's anchoring bias. So you can see how when we're up against changing some of these ideas that are entrenched in our cultures, not only do we have maybe some kind of bias that is rooted in our instinct to contend with, we can have multiple biases, and in a lot of cases, we're probably contending with people that have all 12 major forms of cognitive bias wrapped up and bound up into a single issue. And the war on drugs is one of those that is an excellent example of this. And you can see how, when people, even the evidences of your senses are oftentimes not enough to override anchoring bias or heuristic bias or any of these biases. Because, we have those people that still believe that marijuana is a terrible, harmful, destructive plague upon society, even though they know they have marijuana smokers in their family that are just fine. They know that presidents have done cocaine and marijuana at this point, and they're still president. Elon Musk smokes dope on what was it, the Rogan show, and he's obviously a fucking billionaire. You know what I mean? The guy builds spaceships as a hobby or whatever. So a lot of these narratives that marijuana is going to make you stupid, or you're going to be a loser and you're never going to have any money, even though the evidence is like right in people's faces, you still have people that are stuck on their anchoring bias, they're stuck on their heuristic bias, and one of the reasons it's such a great example of the heuristic bias is because the research on marijuana and on psychedelics, particularly on psychedelics, has unequivocally shown since the beginning, actually, that these substances are not addictive, they're not very dangerous, and that they're extremely beneficial. And I can tell you, as someone who is a facilitator and an advocate since the 90s, since the early 90s. I mean, hell, might have even started advocating for psychedelics before I was a teenager. I can't really remember when I actually started talking about it, but I was, it's a long time, dude. People can receive, perfectly, what would you call it, like institutionally sanctioned research, and they'll still reject it because they believe that the information that they received first is more relevant, and that the propaganda that they have gotten from the news and from other sources overrides the clinical studies, even though they would probably tell you, and this is called bias, where people believe that they're less biased than they actually are. So there's another level of bias. See how 3 levels of bias we have just uncovered in one single sociological or cultural problem that we desperately need to resolve. It's pretty crazy. And by the way, just in case I get too tired to finish this, or you guys end up dialing out or whatever, this is another reason why we need psychedelic therapy and psychedelic experiences. The inter-region communication of the brain that is enhanced, the default mode network communicating with the conscious part of the mind, I can't recall its proper name at the moment, is how we override these biases. Because when you have more communication in the brain, you have new neural pathways forming, and you have regions of the brain communicating that don't normally communicate, then a lot of these neuronets connections that weren't being made before are now suddenly there. And so there is no more powerful tool for correcting these biases and for resolving them in our being than psychedelic compounds. This is facts. Okay, so bandwagon bias. This is just following the herd, and I don't really feel like we need to talk about it that much, except that, it is, actually let's talk about it in the context of politics, because that is where it manifests the worst. This blind following of the demographic that you recognize as your tribe. And And we're going to kind of go off on a side tangent here because one of the things we have to be doing is looking for solutions to these problems. And one of the things that Brandt and Shapiro were suggesting is that we can kind of isolate ourselves in communities where we surround ourselves by people that have a common goal and similar ideologies so that we don't have so much conflict. And that sounds well in theory, but I think, it's actually, particularly in an integrated society like the United States, and I mean integrated economically, or how would you say, like, you gotta travel, man, and it's already a problem. So say someone from California is traveling through a conservative town in Texas because they're trying to get to Vermont or something. I mean, that was a bad analogy because you don't really have to go, but you know what I mean. Like, okay, so let's say Utah, and they run into some serious shit because they are ideologically out of sync with the inhabitants of the place they're going to. So I don't know that this sort of ideological isolation is really going to help mitigate the effects of bandwagon bias, basically, is what we're talking about here. And so, I did appreciate the fact that they were talking about how, there are so many different ways to express our individuality as human beings. And that's one of the things that I found inspiring about Shapiro, because here he is he's a conservative, but he doesn't say that people shouldn't have the right to have a sex change. He has no problem with people being homosexuals. He doesn't think that the government should intervene in anything, which is also something that I support. And I really appreciated hearing someone from the right wing talking to a large constituency in a way that 20 years ago you would have only have associated with left wing people. So that was good. And by the way, just for the record, I do agree with a lot of what he says about it. I mean, I don't think anyone should be forced to deny objective reality. I don't see any reason why you can't refer to someone as a she if they want you to. But I think that some of the suggestions that be like litigated, that's just not okay. It's absolutely not okay to litigate that sort of ontological stuff. Like, you can't mandate someone to deny objective biological reality. That's just not cool. It's not necessary to insult someone because they feel like they're a different sex than they were born. But litigating that is just completely insane. So there are a couple of issues I have with the idea that we can just form communities based around ideologies and that will resolve the cultural dissonance that we're experiencing in the United States, because people travel. And I think that what happens in any system, it doesn't matter whether it is a body of water or a body of bodies. It will stagnate if it doesn't mix. I don't think it's good to have ideological inbreeding that persists over years, decades. So that actually surprised me a little bit, that they seemed on the same page, that this sort of isolation of groups of people would resolve the conflicts and lead to some kind of greater peace. As you guys know, I'm all about a syncretic approach to spirituality, to the music that I make. I try to incorporate the best parts of everything, and I think that what we really need to try to cultivate is a level of open-mindedness that transcends the need for isolation. Then again, it's a big world out there with a lot of very dogmatic people that are crawling with biases, and maybe their idea of isolating people according to ideology is more realistic than my idea, which would be to just try to elevate consciousness so that that's not necessary. And so, yeah, I mean, the ideological stagnation and the I don't know about that. So we're talking about bandwagon bias. So, one of the things that bandwagon bias leads to is more bias, and that other type of bias is ostrich bias. And this is the head in the sand, ignoring all of the negative shit that you don't want to have to look at, so that you can uh, 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 maintain your confirmation bias. Isn't this crazy? It's like our neural network is just a big conglomeration of biases uh, that we have a tremendous amount of difficulty overcoming and transcending. Well, Terry, I don't know how old you are, I guess, but I feel the opposite way. I'm amazed that we have made so much progress with psychedelics just because, relative to where we were at when I was 20 years old, even. I mean, when I lived in Colorado and people started talking about legalizing medical marijuana, that blew my mind. You know, when I was sitting on a committee with cops talking about a grow and I wasn't scared. That blew my mind. That felt like some serious progress. I mean, I understand what you're saying that we're way overdue with acknowledging the value and the necessity even of these compounds. But I don't think it's surprising. There is nothing more threatening to the entrenched elite and the powers that be than a free-thinking population capable of critical thought, self-awareness, and if people don't have all of these cognitive biases that we are elucidating here, it's going to be propaganda will just not even work. So, because of the holistic mind that is derived from the consumption of psychedelic compounds, what you have is the negation of the efficacy of propaganda. And so that's the real reason that psychedelics are illegal. And before you call me a conspiracy theorist, just, look at the actual records. That when the researchers that were commissioned by the United States government in the early 60s did their research, the reports that they sent to the United States government did not say these are terrible, horrible drugs that are going to make people insane, and they're going to make Negroes rape white women, which is what they said, and I'm just quoting it verbatim, like they did in the 30s and 40s about marijuana. Although it should also be noted that that's not really what the researchers said. That's just what the Anslinger guy said to Congress. So I'll have to redact that statement because it's actually totally wrong. They actually said marijuana is not that harmful even in the 30s and 40s, and the government just said, okay, that's not what we wanted to hear. So at any rate, what I'm saying is the researchers actually said, in fact, Dr. Humphrey Osmond said that these, in his opinion, the psychedelic compounds could treat every known psychological aberration known to man, from addiction, PTSD, trauma, all of this shit that's coming out from the research and now from the Berkeley and all of the organizations that do the research is exactly what Dr. Humphrey Osmond said, but Humphrey Osmond said it in 1961. It's not like this is new information, and I think that's really important for people to get through their heads. I think even a lot of people that kind of think out of the box really have a hard time accepting the degree to which this shit is transpiring. You know what I mean? But it's provable that it's not that the government had bad information. It's not that they were misguided, misinformed. They were not. They had the right information. They were told that these substances are not harmful and that they could cure addiction and depression and all of this stuff, and that is why they banned them. And a lot of it is just profit motive. The idea that they're suppressed because they know they need to suppress consciousness, I totally believe that. But even from the point of view of someone who might feel that that is kind of wooey, wooey, I don't know. Just looking at it from the point of view of the two biggest lobbyists in the United States, even at the time, are Big Pharma and the military arms manufacturing constituents, right? Those are the big boys. And so when you have Big Pharma selling so many benzodiazepines that the ocean's testing positive for Xanax, and you have these natural compounds that anyone can grow in their closet. You know, magic mushrooms are super easy to grow. That can cure all of these issues in a single dose, oftentimes. They're not going to like that shit. You know what I mean? And then when it comes to, and you have to think about, we're not just talking about one issue. We're talking about addiction. You know, they have chantrix or whatever for smoking that actually, let's talk about the difference between the actual neurobiological and neurochemical function of these compounds in the brain, of the pharmaceutical drugs versus the psychedelics. The psychedelics can cure addiction by causing an accelerated growth of new neural pathways. So you have more brain activity and enhanced elasticity so the brain can change the patterns that it's already established, right? Chantrix cures addiction by burning out entire sections of the brain. Like, which thing do you want to put in your body? The thing that melts your brain in order to cure your addiction, or the LSD that actually enhances memory, that grows new neurons? Psilocybin actually is the only compound known that can actually rejuvenate damaged, shriveled brain cells. It was thought to be impossible until it was discovered in vitro that psilocybin could do this. And so now they're trying to resuscitate brain dead people at John Hopkins. They're doing the research. So we got way off track there. I lost my bias thread. By the way, you guys, if you're someone that follows the channel and you know what's going on with us, you know we've been like kind of sidetracked in the jungle and things have gone a bit haywire. But today we discovered that we are going to move on the 18th to, in California also just legalized psychedelics, I think. We're going to move to a 15-hectare property way out in the jungle on the Napa River, gold panning, parrots, monkeys on the property, like completely crazy. Pitahaya farm for 3 months. And right now we're kind of in the town, and it's cool, but it's not that cool. And so now we're going to be like way out in the jungle, huge piece of property right on the river. So it's going to be, we're really looking forward to that. And also, we're demonetized, so we get no money for anything that we do on YouTube. So do me a favor and hit the like button, share, subscribe. No, there'll be jungle. Internet in the jungle for sure. And there is an email address where you can send PayPal or Zelle in the chat and in the description, as well as a Cash App and a Binance Smart Chain crypto wallet address you can send to support, which we really do appreciate. I've lost a few supporters again because I say bad things about Biden. Okay, so we were talking about ostrich bias before. And so this one ties in also with choice bias, which is where like you've made a decision, right? And so ego compels you to basically engage your ostrich bias when there is evidence that your choice was not good. Yeah, I mean, well, he's getting worse, I think. And it's not just about criticizing Biden. People, I think, have a hard time understanding how bad him and Harris really are. And the reason that I hate him so much is actually deeply personal. I have spent my entire life in the communities that he destroyed or had a hand in destroying. So to me, Joe Biden is not solely responsible for something that is really, it's not unfair to compare it to the Holocaust, because no, 6 million people were not gassed or whatever, but 20, 30, 40 million people given decades in prison that didn't deserve it is comparable, I would say. I mean, it's like just instead of killing them terribly, it's torturing them. A lot of them will be killed in there, families destroyed on the outside. I mean, it's definitely in the ballpark of, he's not Hitler, but he's in the clique with these people. It's that bad in my mind. And I've actually, grown up surrounded by the people that were directly affected. by the shit that he did. And so when you have, speaking of cognitive bias and selective perception, when you have a bunch of people saying we need to get rid of these Nazis by putting this Nazi in office, it's horrifying, and it's some. I mean, and since I started talking about it, like, a third of the people just immediately dropped off, because when you challenge people's biases, it triggers a fight or flight response, and so they're almost instantly going to tune you out. And it's also that choice bias that I'm talking about. Like, once you have committed to an action, you don't want to take responsibility for, do you think any of those people that just left want to believe that they had a hand in putting someone who is comparable to a Nazi war criminal in office? No. But did they? Yes. Absolutely. 100%. It's that bad, And one of the things that prompts me to continue to talk about it, even though I lose friends, I lose supporters, my family has been struggling financially forever, and almost every single time I say something really bad about Joe Biden, I lose some money. That's a fact. It's true. Maybe not every time, but, often enough that you'd think I just would have stopped by now. I just can't, because I think it's something that is that important that, we have to address it. We have to acknowledge it. And so what were we talking about? Ostrich bias is obvious what that is. You put your head in the sand when you don't want to deal with the reality. And I think that this last election was the most glaring example of that's humanly possible on both sides of the aisle. People on Trump's side ignored all the obvious warning signs, some of the loony shit that guy did. And the most over the top example was the people that believed he was going to go on some kind of pedophile crusade and get rid of all the elite pedophiles. When there's dozens of pictures of him with Epstein, and he's made atrocious comments about his own daughter when she was as young as 13. It's just completely insane to ignore evidence that's it's readily available, it's there, it's all over the media, and yet you're going to choose to just believe the opposite. And so, on the other hand, though, we have, this assertion that we're going to get rid of racism by putting Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in office, and also, these people are talking about how they hate the right wing. Let's analyze this a little bit. Donald Trump was trying to go on Rogan. So we have a Republican president that is willing to go and sit in a room with a guy that regularly smokes marijuana on his podcast, promotes DMT and LSD and all of these psychedelics. And then we have Joe Biden, who's supposed to be on the left, that said that legalizing marijuana was the stupidest thing that anyone had ever done right before he was elected. So who is the right-wing candidate here? Like, who is acting more like a right-wing person? Also, traditionally, we've always associated the right wing with being the people that put everyone in jail. All right, Randy. Joe Biden is probably responsible for more unfair incarcerations than any other politician in U.S. history. So when you confront people that, and they said, well, we need to get rid of the racist. So as a person that has no love for either candidate, I went on YouTube and everywhere that I could look, and I checked to see how much racist shit Donald Trump had actually said and compared it to Biden. I mean, I know I've talked about this a million times, but the reality is that I found hours and hours and hours of Biden saying horribly racist shit. And he actually dropped out of the presidential race with Obama because he said of Barack Obama, he is a clean, educated, articulate black man. Come on, that doesn't happen. It's like a dream. That's why he dropped out of the race. This was only like... Yeah, no, that's completely insane. I mean, it definitely happened. I don't understand the whole Holocaust denial thing. That just makes absolutely no sense to me. But anyways, when you point out that the evidence that Joe Biden is racist is exponentially more of it than Donald Trump, provably, demonstrably, people just tune you out of their lives if they're supporters of them. I have never said anything about Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. I don't think that it wasn't public record. I mean, Kamala Harris, she was excoriated by a dozen judges for, they called her evil, abominable. She kept innocent people on death row. She kept people in prison past their release dates because they were doing slave labor for the state and stuff. There has been no greater demonstration of ostrich bias and choice bias, but particularly ostrich bias, than the last well, okay, so Charles, you're saying that it didn't happen. Cui bono, who benefits? Like, why would they pretend like the Holocaust happened when it didn't? What is the point in that? That's one of the things I've really never understood. Another crazy one, you guys, and this is something that we really, this is why, to bring this full circle, I think I might have, selective perception is just where you filter out a lot of reality because it doesn't conform with your preconceptions. And I've been all over the place tonight, and I have not really accomplished what I set out to, but I'm hella sick, man. I just felt so inspired by this conversation that I saw, or at least the idea that we could create meaningful dialogue between these. Yeah, Charles, of course I'm down to do that, man. I'm open to hear anything. I just don't see what the point would be. Yeah, look, when it comes to the conspiracy stuff, it's not, I wouldn't put anything past these motherfuckers. But my issue with the conspiracy theorists is that they usually are going on really weak evidence, and there's just tons of conjecture and reading between the lines, and I can usually tear them apart in a matter of seconds. It's just so weak and stupid that you can just obliterate it. There are exceptions, however, and also this is the craziest part about this, I guess. It's not that something is stupid just because it requires a conspiracy or because it's predicated upon a conspiracy. There is a documentary made, I can't remember the guy's name, but there's a channel, and what he mostly does is debunks conspiracy theories, but then he also made a video about all the conspiracies that are provable. And it was like 45 minutes long. It's not that it doesn't happen. And I find the efforts of the elite and the media to portray, there was like all of this momentum behind the narrative that conspiracy theorists are idiots, period, end of story. If anything requires any degree of conspiratorial thought, it is automatically ridiculous and stupid. That's the narrative that we were being fed. And that's clearly fucking stupid. And I think that the fact that, the rules for a successful conspiracy are basically that you have to have a very small group of individuals involved, and you have to be able to determine a benefactor, the cui bono question. And so, just with those two pieces alone, we have big pharma, and we have the military-industrial complex, and we have the big data farmers, big tech, I guess, and they all benefit directly from COVID and war and the lockdown made, big tech like triple as wealthy or some shit. Like, this situation is ripe for being a real life conspiracy theory. We have a very small number of conspirators required to be involved. They all benefit more than any other group on the planet. They actually have the capacity to pull off the conspiracy. And the only real hole in the conspiracy theorist side of the story is that the media actually is uncovering the conspiracy and reporting on it a little bit. Which I have to admit actually even surprises me a little bit, a lot of bit even. So, I'm just too sick and tired to keep going. I kind of want to, because there's just so much to say about all this. But, when you look at all of the cognitive biases and the way that they are sort of interlaced, you can see every element of our of the dissonance, cultural dissonance that we're experiencing is bound up in these. Well, we didn't mention religion, and so selective perception. Okay, here we go. Let's do selective perception a little bit real quick, and then I'm signing out because I want to lay down and eat some popcorn and watch Netflix because, man, I was so fucking sick this time. I'm already not healthy. I was seriously worried that I might die like 2 nights ago. I was like, man, this is it. There's no way I'm gonna fucking survive this time. I'm just done for. But man, these plants, watch out for that too, you guys. Oh, by the way, I'm moving this channel because we're demonetized and I want to remonetize. So please look out for syncretic spiritual systems, and it's going to be, I'm going to self-censor a lot because I have to have some kind of professional facade if I'm going to continue to do this meaningfully. So I'm going to leave this channel up, and this is going to be my channel for just like acting like I'm sitting in my living room with my ass out, just rattling off to my buddies or whatever around the campfire with a 6-pack. And then the other channel is going to be like more serious, a little bit more clean, no politics at all, ever, no matter what. Total neutrality in that regard. And I'll probably even like get a faux hawk and start wearing polo shirts or something. Just kidding. I'm not going that far. But do watch for, there are these crazy ass here. Let me get a piece. This stuff is so weird. I might have showed you guys this before, but check it out. Doesn't it looks like I just like ripped the limb off of a monkey, doesn't it? Like that's all fur, and inside it's like almost like cucumber. See? It's like a parasitical plant called Rabo de Mono. I don't know if Fernando's still out there. Maybe he can tell me what Rabo means, because I haven't been able to. I don't know if I just haven't looked it up, but it's something of monkey, and it's one of the medicinal plants the Quechua used. I've been making this tea, and I'm going to show you guys how to make it because I'm pretty sure it works. Research on these plants has confirmed 90% of what the indigenous say about them. Uña de gato is amazing, and it has so many applications that it's just mind-boggling. Sangre de Drago is another one that has been studied extensively, and it also has been confirmed to do all kinds of amazing shit. And then there's this other stuff called Dr. Santi that I don't know what tree. I haven't been able to figure out what the Latin name is to look and see what research has been done. But the Shuar are up there with the Shapiro. They're like the 2 tribes in South America that are considered to have the most extensive knowledge of plants, and they regarded as the highest top of the totem pole for medicinal plants. So I'm going to make the tea on camera and post that probably in the next couple of days. Okay, so selective perception. Yeah, Terry, I'm sick of it, man. But we're stoked to move to this new property, man. I couldn't believe that that was some nice news to wake up to this morning. I mean, it's out there in the jungle, Quechua community. Hey, by the way, we're talking about cultural problems, and there's this interesting circumstance here. You know what we don't have here in Miss Hawaii, Ecuador? Cops. None. No cops. Zero. Zip zilch. You know what else we don't have? Crime. Like none. Like never. Drugs? Nope. Interesting, isn't it? That can happen. And I'm pretty sure it's like that in like most of the, I don't know, man. I don't know if it's, actually, you know what what I think it is plant medicine for thousands of years. It's an indigenous community. Like, there are almost no mestizo people here, I'm not saying anything bad about mestizo people. Not any worse than white people anyways, you know what I mean? Not civilized, that's not a good word, but you know what I'm saying, like, non-indigenous people that don't drink plant medicine for thousands of years, that that need cops and shit in prisons. Okay, so selective perception and religion real quick, and then I'm out. And please do support us if you can. Look in the description, there's a whole bucket full of different ways that you can send us support. At least hitting the like button and sharing and subscribing, and definitely subscribing, hit the bell notification so that when I switch to the new channel, you can follow me there. So here is the best example of selective perception. And I did talk about this in the last live stream. If you're Christian, just go ahead and tune out now because you're not going to like it. I mean, don't actually, because you need to hear this shit. And actually, this is one of my videos on TikTok that's doing really well right now, which pleases me. But it's mostly Christians getting pissed as hell. But what I said, there's this lady saying like, oh well, the Satanists are the definition of evil because they sacrifice innocent children in order to appease their evil God. And my head almost exploded. Like, lady, have you read the New Testament? That's literally the plot. Like, so you're telling me that you worship a God that you define, like you would use that God and his behavior to define evil. And like, and maybe even crazier than that is that they don't even notice. They don't even notice. I mean, this is one of the big things with the Christian right wing. They're like, oh my God, the Satanists are blood-sacrificing innocent children. You mean like your God did in the New Testament? Like, how in the hell could you possibly do that? And I think, the analogy is, or this example is, you don't have to read. Everyone knows the story. You don't have to read the fucking book to know that. But the fact that even, people that aren't Christians, like most of them never, that it's that crazy. It just doesn't click in your head because you're accustomed to it. You know what I mean? It's part of your environment your whole life. You don't really think about it too much. But yeah, that is selective perception in God mode for sure. So thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. I gotta go. This is like 30 minutes longer than I had planned, and I'm super sick. But the next time you see me, I'll have a guitar in hand, hopefully, unless I remain ill, and then I'll do another live stream first. But hoping I can get better because I'm gonna take some kind of entheogen and play some music. So thanks again for supporting and watching, and I guess I never mentioned how to resolve the cognitive bias and shit, but I don't need to. My solutions are the same as they always are. And it's just that you have to take psychedelics, meditate, and develop a mindfulness practice that is ubiquitous throughout all of your moments. You know what I mean? You have to train your mind to watch what you're doing, analyze it, look for the causes, and spend some time in rudimentary psychoanalysis. Because remember about bias. Everybody hears this stuff and they laugh at all these fools with all of their unconscious biases and all of this cognitive dissonance and all this shit, and they think it doesn't apply to them. You know, Christians are a great example of this again because Jesus told them, "You will not understand the parables," but yet they all seem to think they knew exactly what he meant. Like, who do you think he was talking to? You know, the other guy apparently was the one that didn't understand the parables. So, good night, everybody.